At first glance, it looks simple. America has planes, ships, bases, allies, and enormous firepower. Iran has sanctions, damaged infrastructure, and pressure from multiple sides. When you look at it only through the map of oil and headlines about bombings, it's easy to get the feeling that the outcome is just a matter of time. But this is exactly where the problem begins. Because this war is not just about who has the stronger air force, nor about who destroys more targets from the air. And it's definitely not just about one strait that's been talked about for weeks. That's also why, with more American pressure and troop movements into the region today, it's becoming increasingly clear that Iran is a much tougher opponent than it might seem at first glance. The real answer isn't just hidden on the surface of the sea, but deep inland. In the mountains, in distances and terrain that seem manageable and interesting on a map, but in a real war turn into a trap. And while the world's attention is focused on whether Washington will push even harder, another question is emerging, one that's talked about less, but could be just as dangerous. Because Iran is not playing on just one chessboard. And if the White House thinks that it's enough to hit a few targets, restore order at sea, and wait for Tehran to collapse, it may quickly find out that it's dealing with a country that can't be broken, as easily as someone in Washington might wish. America today is doing exactly what it does best. It's applying pressure from a distance. It is sending more forces to the region, expanding its presence at sea, threatening even tougher strikes, and at the same time making it clear that if Iran does not back down, other strategic targets could be next. Thousands of American paratroopers are already heading to the area. After previous reinforcements of the Marine Corps and in the background of the deployment, scenarios of limited ground operations are being discussed again. Not a large-scale invasion like Iraq in 2003, but interventions meant to take away Iran's room to maneuver, show strength, and force it to back down. On paper, it sounds like a plan that Washington can sell both at home and to its allies. Tough, decisive, but supposedly still under control. But here's the catch. Pressure from afar can destroy, but it can't automatically break a state that is built to survive even under pressure. You can destroy infrastructure, you can threaten oil terminals, power plants, or other targets. You can move ships and soldiers closer and closer, but that still doesn't solve the hardest part. You won't solve what happens next. Whether Iran will really break or just become more hardened. Whether a limited operation won't start turning into a broader and less predictable war. That's exactly the biggest problem for Washington today. Not how to strike Iran, but how to strike it in a way that doesn't trigger even more chaos than what they're trying to stop. And maybe most importantly, this pressure is already running up against the reality of the wider region. It's not enough to just watch Iran itself. As soon as the conflict spreads through Tehran's allies, through the sea or other threatened routes, America is suddenly not fighting just one country, but an entire network of risks that multiply each other. And that's exactly why it's already clear today that when it comes to Iran, there's a huge difference between saying we can strike and saying we can win. Many people automatically think of Iraq when they hear the words American war in the Middle East, but that's exactly where the biggest mistake can happen. Iran is in a different league. It is several times larger than Iraq, has about twice the population, and its map doesn't look like an open battlefield, but rather like a country that is a defensive system in itself. According to available estimates, Iraq has an area of about 438,000 square kilometers and approximately 43 to 47 million inhabitants. Iran has about 1.65 million square kilometers and approximately 89 to 92 million people. Even this difference alone suggests that if someone is comparing Iran to Iraq in 2003 in their mind, they are comparing two completely different military realities. And even more important than the numbers themselves is what this country actually looks like. A large part of Iran consists of a high inland plateau surrounded by mountain ranges, especially the Zagros Mountains in the west and the Alborz Mountains in the north. In other words, if someone tried to break Iran militarily by land, they wouldn't be going through open space, but through a country that forces the attacker to slow down, split their forces, and pay a higher price for every step forward. And that's exactly why Iran is not Iraq. Not because it is invincible, but because any major war against it would look completely different from what many remember from American campaigns in past decades. If you look at Iran from above, you not only start to understand its size, but also why it can be described as a fortress. A large part of the country consists of a dry inland plateau, enclosed from the west by the Zagros Mountains, from the north by the Alborz Mountains, and from other sides by additional mountain and semi-desert barriers. So you're not attacking a flat map, but a country where the terrain already determines in advance where you can go, where you can defend, and where the attacker will get stuck. The Zagros slows you down even before you encounter the main resistance. The Zagros aren't just some hills on the edge of the map. They stretch for about 600 kilometers along the western and southwestern part of Iran, all the way toward Hormuz, forming a natural wall between the Iranian interior and the directions from which pressure could come from Iraq or the Gulf. The Alborz, on the other hand, separates the north of the country from the central region and creates another barrier at one of the most important cores of the Iranian state, that is, the area around Tehran. The result is simple and very unpleasant for any attacker. Any larger ground advance would not begin with free movement, but with crossing zones that the defender knows can prepare and can force the attacker to fight in disadvantageous terrain. With Iran, the attacker's strength very quickly encounters the physical reality of the country, with narrow routes, elevations, desert and semi-desert areas, and an interior that cannot be easily bypassed. This is why, in such a scenario, Iran does not appear just as another Middle Eastern state under pressure, but as a space that is in itself a defensive system. And the deeper someone tried to go, the more this fortress would close in around them. Here, the war shifts into a safer yet more disadvantageous form. Because Iran doesn't have to push just from its own territory. It's enough for its wider camp to get fully involved. And suddenly, a problem in the Persian Gulf becomes a problem for the entire region. That's exactly why the Houthis in Yemen are so important. They have already entered this war by attacking Israel, and by doing so, they reminded everyone that Tehran isn't playing on just one chessboard. It can also exert pressure indirectly, through allies who may not be on Iranian territory, but who can strike at places that are just as sensitive for global trade. That place is Bab al-Mandab, a narrow strait at the entrance to the Red Sea. A huge part of global trade passes through there, and that's where Asia connects with Europe via the Suez. And the point is simple. If the world feels that everything depends on a single strait near Iran, it can quickly find out that another problem is waiting just a few thousand kilometers away. Associated Press reminds us that about 12% of global trade passes through Bab al-Mandab, and Reuters is already reporting that major shipping companies are avoiding this route and sailing around Africa, which extends their journey by another 10 to 14 days and increases costs. And this is exactly where Iran's hidden power lies, which is talked about less than missiles and bombs. It's not just the ability to defend its own territory, it's the ability to spread the conflict so that America and its allies suddenly aren't putting out just one fire, but two at the same time. One near Iran and the other near the Red Sea. And the more transportation starts to shift, become more expensive and complicated, the less this war looks like a clear display of American power, and the more it looks like a conflict where even a weaker player knows how to strike exactly where it hurts the most. We're getting to the core of the matter. America knows how to punish Iran. It can destroy its bases, warehouses, ships, command centers, and sensitive infrastructure. It knows how to apply pressure under which a weaker state might start to collapse. But there's a huge difference between making someone suffer every additional day of war and actually forcing them to capitulate or break. And Iran is exactly the kind of state where this difference becomes fully apparent. Because if the opponent survives the initial shock, if they retain the ability to respond, if they can spread the conflict beyond their own territory, and if they still show the ability to influence the sea, trade, and the mood of the region, then bombing stops being a path to quick victory and instead turns into an expensive and prolonged war of attrition. This can already be seen today in the fact that the war is entering another month. Yet the problems America was supposed to solve are actually spreading rather than being resolved. Bombing can destroy targets, but it cannot control the consequences by itself. You can't keep trade routes open just by hitting another radar or another warehouse. It doesn't solve the fact that shipping is already bypassing Suez and Bab al-Mandab around Africa, which increases costs, lengthens routes, and spreads the consequences of the war far beyond Iran's borders. It doesn't change that Iran isn't acting alone. If Iran's allies and proxy actors fully enter the equation, Washington suddenly isn't facing just one weakened country, but a conflict that's expanding in scope. That's exactly why it's no longer just about how many targets America hits, but whether it actually gains control over the situation by doing so. And so far it seems that while it can strike hard, it's still not enough for America to dictate on its own how and when this war will end. If you want to turn bombing into a real tool to break Iran, it's not enough just to destroy. You have to make it matter and at the same time force your opponent to lose the will, the means, and the space to respond. And that's much harder in a country that has mountains, a vast interior, a huge population, and a network of regional allies than it seems from television maps and evening headlines. That's why today the question isn't whether America can strike Iran. It can. The real question is whether it can force Iran to lose through bombing. If Trump really wanted to break Iran, just continuing what he's doing today wouldn't be enough. The first option is to keep increasing the pressure without a large ground war. More strikes, more threats, more destruction of infrastructure, and trying to force Tehran to make concessions through economic and military pain. That's the direction things seem to be heading now. Trump has once again threatened attacks on oil fields, power plants, and other key targets, while Iran refuses to back down on maritime shipping. The problem is that this kind of pressure can trouble Iran, but it still might not be enough to actually break the regime. It is more likely that the war will just become tougher, more expensive, and longer. The second option is to go a step further and carry out limited ground operations. Not an invasion of the whole Iran, but specific strikes at strategic locations. Reuters writes that additional American force systems in the region could support scenarios such as the occupation of Karg, securing shipping routes, or operations targeting enriched uranium. That's why additional units are now arriving in the region, including paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division, following the earlier arrival of approximately 2,500 Marines. But this is already the moment when a show of force starts turning into a real ground operation with high risk. Because if you enter Iranian territory even in a limited way, you're no longer just showing strength. You're already taking on the risk that you'll have to hold the area, supply it, and respond to retaliation. And the third option is a large-scale ground war. That's exactly the scenario where the entire video so far changes from analysis to a warning. Because at that point, America wouldn't just be fighting to open a route or destroy a few targets, but to actually break a large, mountainous, and still combat-capable country, which would be interested in the basic development at its core, but it still hasn't committed to sending troops directly into Iran. It's not a coincidence. Such a move would dramatically increase the risk of a wider regional retaliation, an even greater attack on energy infrastructure, and further shock to global markets. In other words, the more Trump really wanted to break Iran, the more the operation, which was supposed to look like tough pressure, would turn into a huge war with an unclear ending. And that's exactly why Iran is such an unpleasant opponent for Trump. Not because America doesn't know how to strike. It does, and it shows it every week of this war. The problem is elsewhere. Iran is not an opponent you can break with one type of force, one direction of attack, or one quick operation. It's a country that defends itself with its very map. That it can spread a conflict far beyond its borders. Even today, as Washington increases pressure and sends more troops to the region, there is still no clear way to force Iran to lose without turning this war into something even bigger and even more costly. Trump can bomb Iran. He can threaten to destroy its infrastructure. He can try limited scenarios and put pressure on it from the air and from the sea. But the more he would want to move from punishment to actually breaking Iran, the more he would have to risk a war that would not only be fought over Iran, but also at sea, along regional routes and through other actors, including the Houthis. And that's exactly the point of the whole story. Hormuz is not everything. Iran is not just one strait. Iran is a fortress.
Thank you for your attention. If you liked the video, I would appreciate a like and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next ones I'm currently working on. You can support my work with a thank you, and to help the video reach more people, click praise. I appreciate it.